in this statement from Jesus, we learn that Jesus even went through that. That there on that cross, even having God with him, even being so close to God, so close to the Father, that when you looked at Jesus, you looked at the Father, even then, he stopped and said, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why? That was how far God came into our lives. That was how much he wanted to be with us. That was how close he came to what we go through. That even the experience of despair, of hopelessness, is part of what God grew up through Jesus' death and Jesus' resurrection. And there's something you need to know from this. And it's this. God was still there. God was still there. Now, Jesus didn't feel God there at that moment, maybe. Jesus didn't sense God's presence because Jesus, for all that he was God, was a human being. And the whole point is that Jesus went through all those things. But we know that God was there. We know that it was part of the bigger picture. We know that that cross and even that despair is part of the path that led to glory. Not just for Jesus, but for all of us. We know that that pain and that suffering was part of what Jesus needed to go through. And so we know God never left. And that tells you something really important, which is that God's being there and our feeling like God is there are not the same thing. I think this is a thing that it's easy to get confused about. It's easy to get hung up on, especially today. You know, I like upbeat music. I like cheerfulness. I like humor. I like energy. All those things. And yet, you have to remember that feeling good and having God in your heart are not the same thing. There's this idea we have. We talk about spirit-filled worship. And a lot of times that's when people are jumping up, have their hands in the air, are singing and dancing, excited. There's that buzz, that charge. And that can be spirit-filled worship. But a funeral where people are deeply moved and crying and just empty of themselves, that can be spirit-filled worship too. Times when people are sitting still, saying nothing, can be spirit-filled worship too. And it's not just about worship, it's about ourselves. Those moments when we look around and we know that everything has a purpose and a plan, and we feel like God is leading us in a direction, those are moments in our life when God is there and the Spirit is close to us. But those moments when we look around and nothing makes any sense and things are going wrong for no reason and we've done our best and everything is still not working out and it's a mess and we don't know why, those are times when the Spirit is with us too. God is with us all the time. And so to get caught too much in the feeling of it, the feeling may help us get through it, but the feeling doesn't tell us whether God is there or not. And so today when we hear this reading, my God, why have you forsaken me? Remember where it goes. It's a quote from an older passage in the Bible, from the Psalm that we heard today. And it begins with forsaken, but it ends with hope. Now, it doesn't end with God did everything I needed him to do. It ends with I trust that God will pull me through. It's interesting because the whole psalm is about the attitude of the person talking. Nothing happens with it, except that the person stops and says, maybe God hasn't forsaken me after all. But God is there at the beginning in the despair. God is there at the end in the hope. And so wherever you are in your life, and it can change minute to minute. Some of us are kind of volatile. We go up and down in a hurry. Some of us stay down for a long time and never get to that up. But wherever you are, God is with you now. And if all you have to trust in is not your feeling, but God's promise to you, that's all you need, is God's promise that God is always, always there. And through that cross, we can be certain that God has been there and always will be. And through the resurrection that we're coming to celebrate, we can be just as sure that God will give us that victory over whatever it is in our lives. So I'm going to send you out of here today. I'm going to invite you not to feel better. If you do feel better, that's great. But to know that no matter what your feeling is, God is present with you. And to just take a minute to know that God is with you. And as we join together to remember and to renew our trust in God's presence, we're going to sing an invitation song together. Please stand.